"Did you hear that Jason Benson is going to be in town for the 4th?" asked my friend Jeff. It was last minute, but the town council decided to make him the grand marshal of the parade. They figured Mayor Kane did it last year and he'll likely do it again next year. What's more American than a decorated veteran leading your town's Independence Day parade? "No, Jeff, I hadn't heard that," I replied softly. "He must be pretty high up in the military by now. He was a captain several years ago." "He's a colonel and set to rise even higher soon," agreed Jeff. I pondered Jeff's news for a moment. Jason Benson had always been our town's version of the Golden Boy, the all-American success story. He was quarterback of the high school football team and played shortstop in baseball. He made All-State in both sports, he graduated first in his class, and top universities were vying for his enrollment. He earned an appointment to West Point and graduated near the top of his class there, while also playing football and baseball. This was all quite impressive for him. He was a talented, highly skilled athlete and citizen. I had to admit that. He embodied many qualities I didn't possess. Normally it wouldn't have bothered me much. If it had been anyone else I would have been genuinely pleased for his achievements, but you've probably guessed the issue. He dated Sarah, now my wife, back in high school. At the time, everyone seemed to believe Sarah was his perfect match. She was also an exceptional athlete, the salutatorian of her class, finishing just behind Jason, and the most beautiful girl Williamsport had ever seen. Somehow, they drifted apart after Jason left for West Point and Sarah went to Temple. They never got back together. I was 2 years ahead of them in school. I wasn't a genius, but I did well enough. I majored in engineering at a state university. As computers became an integral part of everyday life, I gravitated towards software development. I worked for several companies before finally gathering the courage to start my own. I still haven't quite figured out how I managed to convince Sarah to marry me, but I did. That remains the greatest achievement of my life, or at least the best thing I ever did on my own. Our 2 daughters were a shared endeavor and a tremendous source of pride for both of us. Sarah rarely spoke about Jason. She understood that part of her past made me uneasy. Inevitably, well-meaning folks in the community would bring up his name from time to time. I always marveled at how these people seemed to believe I should admire and look up to Jason, and even acknowledge how perfect he and Sarah would have been together. It was as if my feelings didn't count when Jason came up in conversation. No one seemed to question the idea that Sarah would have been far better off if she had only stayed with him. To their credit, Sarah's parents never even hinted at such a thing. In fact, I once saw Sarah's mother become visibly upset at a family picnic years ago, when a cousin implied Sarah should have married Jason instead. Only a fool would say something so hurtful and thoughtless. She scolded the stunned cousin in front of a suddenly quiet gathering. If you had any idea what a wonderful husband and father Greg is, you would never make such a ridiculous comment. Sarah smiled at her mom's outburst and squeezed my hand under the picnic table. She always treated me with love and respect, never once entertaining any suggestion that I wasn't the best husband she could have chosen. So what was my issue? It was the lingering presence of Jason Benson, the hero, the all-around great guy. It felt like I was constantly being compared to him and coming up short, both in my own mind and in the eyes of others. My conversation with Jeff ended when my daughter April stole the basketball from the other team's guard and sped past everyone for an easy layup. Both of my daughters played in a summer basketball league. April was deceptively fast and incredibly aggressive. The other team's guards hated playing against her. In fact, the only person I'd ever seen dribble past her without losing the ball was my older daughter June. June was long-legged and moved with an effortless grace that made her appear to be easing off while she played. She would be attending Temple in the fall on a volleyball scholarship. It could have been basketball, but she simply preferred volleyball. April was entering her junior year and was a key player on the basketball team that aimed to win districts and contend for states. I never grew tired of watching my daughters play sports. They excelled in whatever sport they participated in. They always gave it their all. That's how competitive sports are meant to be played. With the speed and athleticism they had inherited from Sarah, they were truly exceptional. June had recently graduated at the top of her class, which greatly influenced the Temple coach's decision to offer her a scholarship. April was engaged in a 3-way competition for top honors in her class. I climbed down from the bleachers as the game ended. The girls were shaking hands with and hugging their opponents. I waited for them before heading to the parking lot. Pretty good game, wasn't it, Dad? Grinned June. April wouldn't even let them get the ball past half court. The coach finally asked her to ease off a little and give their guards a break. Yeah, she sounded just like you, Dad. She said we were playing for fun as well as to win. She didn't want us to hurt the other team's spirits by dominating them too much, chuckled April. June pretty much stopped shooting after the first half to give them a chance, and she was still the high scorer. Well, girls, the summer league is meant to be enjoyable for all the kids. When we started it, we discussed our goals and agreed to promote sportsmanship and teamwork, I recalled. Coach Simons did an excellent job tonight. You're always trying to keep everyone happy, Dad, except when you play against us in the driveway. You never ease up on April or me when we play at home, noted June. That's because you two are mentally and physically strong. I wanted you to learn to never give up and to play as hard as you can. In league games at school, no one takes it easy on you, do they? I asked. You have to understand what type of competition you're facing and play accordingly. Do you think I would succeed in business if I didn't let my clients win at golf most of the time? That's a tough one, Dad. It probably does help that you lose to your clients, but June can easily beat you in golf. I don't think you're letting them win, laughed April. You're not exactly the world's best golfer. Regardless, young lady, I admonished April. I know enough to appear like I'm trying my hardest and to be gracious when I lose. That's the secret to succeeding in business while on the golf course. It's a good thing you explained that to June, Dad, because she'd be dominating and losing business left and right. She does the opposite of you. She looks like she isn't even trying and plays exceptionally well, April boasted about her sister. She needs to observe you more closely so she can pick up some of your techniques, like slicing all the time. We were pulling into the driveway, so I didn't bother trying to frame a suitable response. I'd always been able to coach and teach the kids in sports better than I ever actually played. Sarah was the natural athlete, and the girls inherited that talent from her. I was the one who had to learn every trick of any game just to try to compete. Sarah drove in right behind us. The girls began telling her all about their day and how their game went. As I followed them into the house, I shook my head in disbelief. How did I manage to have 3 such incredible women in my life? Sarah was the top executive at the local hotel and convention center, which was part of a major chain. She started there after graduating with a degree in hotel management. Her parents had hoped she would become a lawyer, but Sarah knew what she wanted and pursued it. Like everything else she attempted, she excelled at it. 2 years ago she reached the top, and even turned down a recent promotion that would have required moving to Kansas. Was anything special happening today, Sarah? I asked. You looked a little more dressed up than usual and you had to stay late. Are the corporate executives in town for the holiday? No, but you certainly are observant, Greg, admitted Sarah. The day after tomorrow is the 4th, and we always sponsor the Grand Marshal's float, as you know. This year the paper wanted to get some pictures to print before the parade. Why did I suddenly feel queasy? I realized that it was what Sarah didn't say that made me anxious. Was our golden boy and local hero there for the pictures, Sarah? You seem to have forgotten to mention that he was going to be in town and serving as the Grand Marshal at the parade. Any chance he'll be in the photos with you? I probed. Sarah fidgeted with her hands and looked around to see if the girls were in the room. She rarely showed any nerves, so this caught my attention. Jason was there, Greg. Our hotel has donated a suite for our local hero. It's just good public relations. His parents moved away from Williamsport a few years ago, and he had no place to stay. We decided to offer a suite to a local man who is now the Grand Marshal at the July parade, Sarah explained, her voice rising slightly. It's just good business and there's no reason to get all upset about it. Then why are you getting upset? I responded immediately. I'm not. Well, maybe I am a little, Sarah conceded. It's just that we have always tried to avoid the topic of Jason. I know how you feel about our past and how frustrating it is when people, even after all these years, keep bringing up his name both to you and to me. This is strictly business, Greg. You are my husband and the only man I love or have ever loved. You need to believe that. It's certainly reassuring to hear you say that, Sarah, and I want to believe you. The question that comes to mind is this. Why did you feel it necessary to keep Jason's return from me? I just told you that I know it's a sensitive topic and I didn't want you to worry or get upset, Sarah reasoned. He simply doesn't mean anything to me. In that case, there should be no reason for me to be upset, and certainly no reason for you to withhold any information from me, is there? I asked. Well, no, there really isn't, Greg. I'm so glad we have this out in the open and are discussing it. It seems like the shadow of Jason has loomed over us ever since we were married or longer, I added. So do you have any more activities scheduled that involve the Colonel? Colonel Benson will be the Grand Marshal at the parade, and then honored at an informal gathering at the hotel the following day, Sarah confessed. There will be some snacks and beverages provided by the hotel, and guests will have the opportunity to celebrate him. Can I assume that you will be the host for this celebration? I asked. Yes, Greg, I will be overseeing the festivities. That is part of my job. If someone is going to reap goodwill and press from this, it had better be me, asserted Sarah. Do you have a problem with it? I don't see that it would matter, Sarah. The plans are set and I wasn't privy to them, but I'll manage as long as what you tell me is true. He means nothing to you, right? You won't get all starry-eyed at the celebration. Sarah showed the telltale signs of being annoyed at my comment, until she caught my little pun. Then she broke into a grin and hugged me. Greg, I love you so much. You're the only one who ever attracts this doe's attention or any other parts, she laughed. I hope that applies to everything of yours that comes in pairs and not just your eyes, Sarah, as well as anything that may be one of a kind. I smiled. You know that's all I have, baby, cooed Sarah. It's all unique and it's all yours. As we passed through the living room, we explained to the girls that we were both too tired to eat and were going to bed. They would have to get by on the leftovers from yesterday's roast beef. Too tired? Laughed June. Then we'd better not hear any noises coming from your room. Last time you guys were this tired, you kept us up half the night. Oh dear, blushed Sarah as I closed our bedroom door. Maybe we'd better wait until the girls are asleep. We don't want them to think we're intimate. They already know we're intimate, as you put it, Sarah, I pointed out as I embraced her and began to kiss her softly. They think we're in love. Well, as long as we don't mislead them, sighed Sarah as she worked on my shirt buttons. Just don't let it get too loud this time. The next evening I casually asked Sarah how her day went as she was preparing dinner. She knew that I was really asking about Jason and if anything happened between them. It went well, Greg. Jason is even more dynamic and assertive than he was in high school. I guess being an officer has sharpened his natural leadership skills, replied Sarah. Sarah, let's clarify something right now. I quickly responded. When I told you that I expected you to be open and honest about Jason, I certainly didn't mean for you to tell me how amazing he is. I want your honest opinions about what a pretentious jerk he is and how glad you are that you married me. That's the kind of honesty I'm looking for here. Greg, the guy may be a hero, all tanned and lean and tougher than an old piece of leather, but he can't compare to you. That's more like it. Tell me more, I prompted. Sure, Jason had to take a call from the President of the United States this afternoon, congratulating him and thanking him, but you served as Vice President of the Elks Club 2 years ago. Jason isn't even a member, stated Sarah with a straight face. It figures, I nodded. The guy probably thinks he's too good for the Elks. He'll certainly never attain the status of treasurer of the soccer club either. What a total loser. Exactly what I was thinking, dear, agreed Sarah. He'll probably mess up his interview on Fox News after the parade tomorrow too. The book he's working on will be incredibly dull. That's what I'm talking about, I almost shouted. The guy probably hasn't ever changed a diaper in his entire life either. That's the real test of character. Medals should be awarded for that. I have to admit it, Greg, it does help when we speak the truth and discuss everything like adults, laughed Sarah. No guy can compare to the one I have. Don't you forget it either, I warned. If you want to be there when my team advances, you'd better play your cards right. My plans for their deployment can be changed right up to the last moment. Those units had better not advance prematurely or they'll be stuck out in the coal buster, and so will their reinforcements, retorted Sarah. You'll know when it's safe to deploy the whole group. I'll decide where and when that advance will occur. You always get to decide, I whined. Why can't I be the one to determine where my units get stationed? Oh, you can, dear, countered Sarah. You decide if you want them in a tissue or someplace of my choosing, but more to the little one's liking. You've demonstrated over the years that I can't trust you to make that decision. If I turn my back on you for a second, you're trying to deploy them where no one has gone before. It's just that the units want to explore that final frontier, Sarah. They're brave little soldiers and they're willing to travel anywhere in the universe, including black holes, I suggested with a smile. Believe me when I tell you that anything that enters that black hole will never survive, Greg. It will simply cease to exist. It would be the end of your team, as well as the vessel in which they travel, cautioned Sarah. Okay, Sarah, I understand, I conceded. It's just human nature that when they can travel anywhere in the solar system except Uranus, that's where they want to go. Sweetheart, be glad that Venus is available for them. That's a planet any normal person would love to visit, and it's really underexplored and underutilized. I don't think your guys would be too happy to be banned from there or to arrive and find other units already in control, warned Sarah with a wicked grin. I pulled Sarah close and held her tight against my chest. When she raised her head to look at me, I pressed my lips gently over hers, and she responded, her mouth opening slightly to invite me in. Why don't you two get a room? Groaned April as she walked into the kitchen. This is where my meals are prepared. Sarah blushed and tried to pull away from me, but I held her firmly. She glanced up at me again, and I gave her another quick kiss before letting her go. Wow, Dad, you really love Mom, don't you? April grinned. Do you think I'll ever find someone like you to care about me? Not until you finish college, you won't, I exclaimed. Honestly, I think your challenge will be keeping them at bay. Sarah gasped and April turned bright red. Then it dawned on me what I had implied. I mean, you'll have to fend them off, I quickly corrected myself. Do you understand what I mean? April remained flushed a bright red, and I felt my own face heat up as I turned to head for the garage. I suddenly remembered that the backyard needed to be mowed. Raising daughters isn't always easy. The parade was a great success, and the cable news stations had crews covering it. Colonel Benson was a man on the rise. He epitomized everything the media sought on Independence Day. I watched his interview later that evening and had to admit he spoke well, looked impressive, and made one proud to be an American. The day after the parade was hectic. Sarah left early to ensure everything would be perfect for the open house they were hosting for Benson. The fact that one cable news crew stayed overnight at her hotel did little to ease her nerves. If her hotel was going to be featured on the news, it had better look immaculate. I decided to show Sarah that I truly appreciated her and all she did for me and the girls. I stopped in to see Jeff at his family's jewelry store. After considering a few suggestions he made, I settled on a pair of diamond earrings. Jeff tried to persuade me to get the matching necklace, but I was already over budget. I figured I could buy that for Sarah another time to complement her earrings. I wandered around the main conference room, watching Colonel Benson mingling with all his admirers. He was gracious and humble. I had to give him credit. He was making a good impression on the residents of his old hometown. The fact that everyone in town already held the belief that he was exceptional didn't hurt his ability to win them over. Sarah was overseeing everything and doing a fantastic job. It was a well-run event, and the hotel was generating a lot of goodwill locally. The gathering was supposed to conclude by 6, but by 6:30 there were still a few lingering guests reluctant to leave until the complimentary food and beverages were gone. I knew things would be finished soon, so I slipped into Sarah's office. I had decided to surprise her with the earrings and then take her to a neighbor's party after dinner, where she could show them off to her friends. I had been waiting for Sarah for 15 minutes when I decided to use her bathroom while I waited. I had just finished washing my hands when I heard her office door close. I felt my big smile evaporate when I realized a masculine voice was speaking. I hadn't closed the bathroom door completely, and the conversation was easily followed. Sarah, I know I keep saying it, but you look fantastic. Just being near you drives me crazy. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever made love to. My gut twisted around and I felt the sweat bead on my forehead. I felt weak and had to lean on sink to stabilize myself. That's very flattering, Colonel, but I have to ask you to please not speak to me like that. I'm quite happily married now and don't want to give you the wrong impression, replied Sarah. That was over 20 years ago and is best forgotten. Sarah, I know that you still feel something for me. I've seen it the past several days while we've been working together, and please call me Jason, replied the smooth hero jerk. The only reason I agreed to spend the holiday here was to see you again. I have to say it was worth it too. I'm sure that you wanted to let the people in your old hometown have the pleasure of having you here for the parade, Jason. You are a hometown boy that made good. Everyone takes a lot of pride in your adventures and success. You are, after all, a real war hero, concluded Sarah. Sarah, come up to my room right now, pleaded Benson. I have to leave early tomorrow morning. Come and let me make love to you again. That will be your special way of thanking me for everything I've done for the country and for you, really. I was close to throwing up. If I started barfing, Sarah would know I was eavesdropping on her conversation. I reminded myself to take slow, deep breaths and managed to regain control of my stomach. I'm married, Jason. My husband would suspect something immediately, reasoned Sarah. He would be extremely upset, to say the least. I saw him hanging around, Sarah. He's not the type to give any trouble. I've had hundreds of men like him under my command. They never challenge me. He wouldn't dare say anything to you, reasoned Benson. Coaching girls' soccer and changing diapers doesn't prepare a man for battle. I could hear the contempt in Benson's voice as he chuckled at his own comment. He didn't seem to hold me in very high regard. Jason, why don't you stay a few extra days if you want to see more of me? Asked my devoted wife. I can keep your room for you with no trouble and no charge. I can't, Sarah. My orders are to report to Washington tomorrow. It's all part of climbing the ladder. I've invested over 20 years and I'm getting close. I sure don't want to mess it up at this point. Is it true that you Rangers have some kind of thing about not leaving a fellow Ranger behind, Jason? Asked Sarah with way too much enthusiasm to suit me. That's right, Sarah. We take an oath and we live by it. Without that trust and knowledge that our brothers are watching our backs, we'd never be able to survive, responded Jason with obvious pride. Come on up to my room, Sarah. You have the chance to have a real hero make love to you tonight. That's very tempting, Jason, answered Sarah. It's just that there are a few things I don't quite understand. Maybe you can explain them to me first? Sure, Sarah, Jason replied quickly. I'll be glad to explain anything so we can hurry up and relive the glory days. Well, Jason, let's start with this. Why do you feel that you are so much better than my husband? I know you have trained and gone to war and been decorated numerous times. Do heroes have to have medals and badges to be a hero? I don't think I get your question, Benson answered slowly. Your husband never risked his life. He hid behind your skirts and coached girls' soccer and went to PTA meetings. He really didn't do anything very courageous. Greg took over the soccer team our daughters played on when the coach broke her femur in a car accident and no one else was willing. He didn't even know the rules. He always watched football, not soccer, continued Sarah. He studied books and read things on the internet so he could do it. He had a tough time and made some mistakes, but he kept the team going. He did that for our daughters and the other girls on the team. Greg helped take care of my father after his stroke so my mother could have some rest. He was never especially close to Dad, but he willingly bathed and fed him. The reason? Because he loves me. He's my hero, Jason, stated Sarah. I'm sure he's a good guy, Sarah. I didn't intend to demean him. It's just that after doing what I've done over the years, it's hard to feel too much respect for men that don't do what I do, answered Benson. That's not a satisfactory response, Jason. Greg worked nights one year so he could attend the girls' activities. He worked 2 jobs for another year so we could save enough money for a down payment on our house. He caught our daughter June skipping school in our garage with a couple of her friends when she was 16. He took her over his knee in front of them and gave her a good talking to. She cried and told him she hated him and ran to her room. He never slept that entire night. He was so worried about her. The next day she apologized and promised to never skip school again. Then she hugged him, reminisced Sarah. That's how a man raises his family, Jason. My next question is this. How could you ask me to forsake my oath? You have so much pride in yours and will risk your life to live by it. Yet you had no trouble suggesting that I break mine, said Sarah more than a bit heatedly. You have contempt for those that break their oath, and then you ask me to break mine. Then you tell me that you have so much time invested in your career and don't feel I'm worth risking its loss, continued Sarah. How about my career and my investment? You think nothing of asking me to take the chance of losing my job and ruining my marriage while you brag to me about yours. Do you really feel so much contempt for me and my life? Is it so beneath yours? Haven't I spent 20 years building my life, my marriage, my career? She demanded. When you put it that way, Sarah, I can see where I might have been a little out of line. It's just that you're so beautiful and we have such wonderful memories together, replied Benson nervously. Those wonderful memories are yours, not mine, Jason, answered Sarah. I regret that I wasn't able to give Greg the honor of being my first. I remember how self-centered you were. I remember being relieved when you left for West Point and seldom came back to Williamsport. Those are my memories. Wow, I had no idea you felt that way, Sarah, Benson responded stiffly. If you'll excuse me, I'll be on my way. With that, I heard the door open and close rather sharply. I remained in the bathroom, worried that Sarah would enter and realize I heard the entire conversation. Luckily, I heard her office door open and close again. She had left. I waited until I was pretty certain that the coast was clear and headed for my car. I called Jeff as I walked across the parking lot. I was in the kitchen, helping the girls make dinner when Sarah entered from the garage. I had been on pins and needles waiting and I had no patience left. Sarah, I'm so glad to have you home, I exclaimed as I hugged her. Greg, I was just finishing up some paperwork, explained Sarah. I wasn't, doing anything. I pressed my lips against hers and held her tightly to my chest. My heart felt like it was going to burst. After a very long time, I pulled my lips from Sarah's. Wow, Dad is really glad to see you, isn't he, Mom? Laughed June. I hope my husband greets me like that after 20 years of marriage. Sarah was looking at me closely. I could tell she was trying to determine exactly why I seemed so glad to see her, and why I apparently didn't need any explanations about her being late. I hope you do find a husband like mine, June, agreed Sarah. He's full of surprises and he sure loves his family. I pulled a small, beautifully wrapped package out of a drawer and handed it to Sarah. She took it from my hands carefully and stared at it. Mom, open it, cried April. I can't wait to see what it is. Sarah's hand seemed to tremble as she tugged at the wrapping. She discarded the paper and held the box in her hand. Then she slowly opened it. 3 sets of eyes began to tear up simultaneously. Oohs and ahs filled the room. The girls scooped up the necklace and placed it around Sarah's neck and hooked it. They each took charge of an ear and soon had the earrings in place. Then all 3 women turned to me. Dad, are they tears? Asked June.